Dr. Lee saves lives every single day, but there's one life in particular that really seemed to save his. Susanti was 5 years old when she woke up to a death-gripping pain in her side. She didn't know yet, but a hernia was strangling her intestines and she had maybe 8 hours until they would burst. The problem was she was living in the remote region of Maluku Tenggara Barat, which does not have a surgeon. So, normally, she would be left alone to suffer. But her mom had heard that there was a visiting surgeon on a neighboring island that was there to help, and so they decided to scrounge up all of their resources to a boat and for 3 days and 2 nights to find him. When they arrived, Dr. Lee was already packed up, but Susanti's mother did not care. She jumped into that makeshift hospital screaming for help, and amazingly, Susanti still had a pulse. So he packed all of his belongings and got ready for another life-saving surgery. That operation was truly nothing short of a miracle. Dr. Lee thinking, how many more cases like this are out there? And the answer is, a lot. Indonesia's 260 million people are spread across 17,000 islands, stretching as far east and west as the United States. But there are only 160,000 doctors. So, if we do the math, that is a horrible, horrible ratio, especially when we consider that in countries like the United States, that ratio is much closer to 300 to 1. And of course, in more remote regions, like Maluku, that ratio is even worse. We also have to consider that in these areas, about 100 million people live on fewer than $3 a day. So taking a simple trip to a hospital that's even further away is enough to bankrupt a family. So yes, there are tons and tons of cases like Susanti's, simply because of lack of infrastructure, running water, and electricity that make it nearly impossible for these operations to be done safely. And of course, they can only be done if there is even a surgeon on the island. And so, at 65 years young, Dr. Lee went back to Jakarta, sold a home, purchased a boat, and converted it into the first of 3 floating hospitals. Since that day, our team has performed thousands of free minor and major surgeries, and will spend about 2 weeks in each location living alongside locals that are in most need of medical attention. In Papua, we hiked up 13 hours up a mountain to get to an area that had not seen a doctor in 70 years since the Dutch left. Each time we go out, we'll spend about 2 weeks, and our team of 20 volunteers will do an average of 6 operations a day, which is a lot. And I think we have to give props to Dr. Lee because he just turned 70 last month and he still comes with us. So why boats, right? Well, the beauty of a floating hospital is that we're not stagnant and we're able to be more accessible to locals. So in many islands, there actually is not infrastructure for roads. And so a lot of people actually get around via wooden tingping or by motorboat if they have access to one. So since we're on water, they can take their boats to us, and it's much easier for them to get to us that way versus walking. The other aspect is that we can strategically place ourselves in the middle of dozens of islands so we can cover many, many more people. Currently, we have 2 floating hospitals that are functioning, and they each have 1 operating room on board.
Kapal ini adalah sebuah kapal barang yang panjangnya 23,5 meter dan lebarnya 6,5 meter yang kami rombak menjadi sebuah rumah sakit seperti layaknya sebuah rumah sakit di atas darat. Ini adalah ruang bedah kami, di mana kami di samping bedah minor juga bisa melakukan bedah mayor.
But last year, we're super excited to say that Julia Tan and her family donated an accommodations oil barge that will vastly help us expand our operations. This awesome barge was custom designed by her family of expert maritime engineers. It has 4 tiers, completely connected by ramps, with 2 fully functioning operating rooms, 40 inpatient hospital beds, a lab, EKG, USG, and X-ray screening rooms, and cabins for 30 medical professionals. What's also awesome and really important to us is that it'll be a pretty decent home for our family of growing volunteers and patients. Elias was one of our first cases of infant malnutrition, but he was only one of hundreds. What we learned was that in many regions, a lot of parents have tons and tons of nutrients, obviously, from the islands, but they don't have the information necessary to know what to feed them. So instead of giving them these nutrient-rich fruits and vegetables, they were feeding them sweet tea just to fill their bellies, which obviously was not working out. So we decided to team up with local clinics and create sustainable programs that taught things like sanitation and nutrition, which was awesome. But for every case that's successful, there are hundreds that go unseen. A couple months ago, a boy living in Region 3 in Tanimbar had an asthma attack. As you can see, on this island, there is only one road, and he happened to live on the coast, which was not connected to the road. But the closest clinic with an oxygen tank was in Zone 1. So his only choice was to jump into a boat and take a 7-hour trip to that clinic. Unfortunately, he never made it because he suffocated along the way. So, why do floating hospitals matter? Well, for one, because Indonesia is amazing. I think we can all agree. There are amazing plants and animals and wonderful people. And we now have universal healthcare, which is awesome, right? But there's still 100 million people that aren't able to access it. So, at doctorSHARE, we believe that it's just a matter of time until we can figure out how to redistribute our resources and make sure that the parents you're born to and the location that you're born in does not determine whether or not you get to survive from an asthma attack. Thank you.